I walked into my own birthday party and found my family dividing my jewelry between them. My daughter said, "Mom won't notice. She's too old to remember." I stayed quiet, smiled, and the next morning they woke up to find the locks changed and police at their door. What I told the officers made them all go pale. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. My hand rested on the cool wood of the dining room door. From the other side came the murmur of voices, the familiar tones of my children and granddaughter. I was about to push it open to walk into my own birthday celebration when a single word stopped me. It was Vanessa's voice, clear and carrying, dividing. Then Marcus, lower, hesitant. "Should we really be doing this now?" "Of course now," Vanessa replied, her tone one of pure practicality. "It's the perfect time. We're all here. Look at this, the emerald necklace. Dad gave her that, 30 years ago? It's classic. It'll go to Alicia eventually." I stood very still. The hallway carpet was soft under my shoes. A framed photograph on the wall showed all of us years ago at Marcus's college graduation. My smile in that picture was wide, unguarded. "And these pearl earrings," Vanessa continued, "they're the good South Sea ones. I've always loved those." I heard the faint clatter of metal on wood. She was laying them out. My things, on my table, in my house. I took a slow breath. I counted to 5 in my mind, a technique I'd learned long ago to still a racing heart. Then I arranged my face. I let the muscles relax into a pleasant, expectant smile. I pushed the door open. The scene was almost festive. Streamers in my favorite lavender color were tacked to the ceiling. A cake, too large for 4 people, sat centered on the table. And on the sideboard, next to the good china I never used anymore, was a spread of my jewelry. The emerald necklace lay coiled like a green serpent. The pearls gleamed. My gold bangle, the one my mother gave me, was next to my cocktail ring from the 70s. Vanessa was holding my sapphire bracelet up to the light. Alicia stood beside her, looking uncomfortable, her arms crossed. Marcus was by the window, pretending to be interested in the bird feeder. They all turned. For a second, there was perfect silence. I saw the shock on Vanessa's face, quickly buried under a wide, strained smile. Marcus's eyes went wide with a guilt he couldn't hide. Alicia looked at the floor. "Mom," Vanessa said, her voice an octave too high. "You startled us. We were just admiring your pieces. For your birthday. Look, we got you a lovely cake." "So I see," I said, my voice calm. I let my gaze travel from the cake to the jewelry on the sideboard. I did not comment on the arrangement. I walked further into the room, my posture straight. I am 68 years old. My bones are good. Bones. I do not shuffle. "Happy birthday, Grandma," Alicia said softly, coming forward to give me a brief, stiff hug. "Thank you, dear." Marcus approached next. "Happy birthday, Mom." He kissed my cheek. His lips were dry. He smelled of the same aftershave he'd used since he was a boy. "We were just talking about how beautiful your collection is," Vanessa said, recovering her composure. She gestured to the sideboard as if it were a museum exhibit. "Alicia was appreciating it, weren't you, Al?" Alicia nodded, her eyes still avoiding mine. "It's history, isn't it?" Vanessa went on, filling the heavy air with her chatter. "Each piece has a story. It's important to know these things. For the future." She picked up the gold bangle again. "Like this. This was Nana's. It should stay in the family, of course." "Of course," I echoed, my tone neutral. I moved to the head of the table and sat down. The chair was my usual one. They had placed a birthday card there, a generic one with flowers on the front. I opened it. 3 signatures: Vanessa, Marcus, Alicia. No message. "Shall we have cake?" I asked. "Yes, let's," Vanessa said too eagerly. She bustled over, pulling out plates. "Marcus, get the knife. Alicia, help me with these napkins." They moved around me, a flurry of forced normalcy. I watched them. I noted the tight set of Marcus's shoulders. I saw the way Vanessa's eyes kept flicking back to the sideboard as if checking her inventory was still there. Alicia moved like a ghost, doing what she was told without a word. Vanessa slid a large slice of chocolate cake onto a plate and set it before me. "Here you go, Mom. Your favorite." It was not my favorite. My favorite was lemon drizzle. Vanessa had forgotten, or she had never known. "Thank you," I said. I picked up the fork. The cake was dense, overly sweet. I took a small bite and smiled. Delicious. Vanessa beamed, taking my smile as approval for everything. The cake, the party, the items laid out on the sideboard. She sat down with her own slice, leaning towards Alicia. In what was clearly meant to be a confidential tone, but which carried perfectly in the quiet room, she said, "See, honey, this is why we're doing it, to be prepared. You can have that bangle there when Mom's too old to remember she owns it. We have to be practical." The fork in my hand did not waver. I placed it carefully on the edge of my plate. The gentle clink of silver on china seemed very loud. All movement ceased again. Marcus froze, a chunk of cake halfway to his mouth. Alicia stiffened, her face flushing a deep red. Vanessa's eyes slowly widened as she realized what she had said and that I had heard it. They all looked at me. They waited for the reaction, the tears of a hurt old woman, the confused stammer, the angry outburst they could then dismiss as irrational. I looked back at them. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, a hard, clear solidity. I saw them not as my children, but as figures in a tableau. Vanessa, the entitled executor, Marcus, the compliant bystander, Alicia, the reluctant witness. I smiled. It was the same serene, pleasant smile I had arranged in the hallway. I let it reach my eyes, just enough to be believable. A gentle, forgiving curve of the lips. "It's a very thoughtful consideration, Vanessa," I said, my voice even and warm. "Planning ahead is so important." The tension in the room broke, but into something brittle and false. Vanessa let out a little laugh, a sound of pure relief. "Yes, exactly. Planning ahead. That's all it is, Mom." Marcus finally put the cake in his mouth and chewed, his eyes on his plate. Alicia excused herself to go to the bathroom. I resumed eating my cake. I tasted nothing. My mind was no longer in the room. It was already moving ahead, calculating, assessing. The hurt was there, a deep old ache. But I compartmentalized it. I placed it in a box and set the box on a high shelf. There would be time to feel it later. Now there was only observation. The rest of the party proceeded with a hollow gaiety. We spoke of the weather. We spoke of Vanessa's recent business trip. We did not speak of the jewelry again, though it sat there on the sideboard, a silent third party to our conversation. When the last crumb of cake was gone, I dabbed my mouth with a napkin. "That was lovely," I said. "Thank you all for this." "It was our pleasure, Mom," Vanessa said, standing to clear the plates. "You just relax. We'll clean up." I did not argue. I watched as she carefully, casually began to gather the jewelry from the sideboard. She did not put it back in my bedroom. She placed it all into a velvet drawstring pouch she produced from her own handbag. She set the pouch on the kitchen counter in plain sight, as if it were a bag of groceries. I understood then. This was not a hypothetical discussion they'd been having. It was a transaction in its first stage. The items had been removed from my domain and placed in a neutral holding zone. Their zone. I felt a click inside me, like the turning of a key in a long unused lock. "You all must be tired," I said, rising from my chair. "The guest rooms are made up. Please stay the night. The roads are dark." They accepted, as I knew they would. It was convenient. It was expected. Vanessa came to me later as I stood by the staircase. "Let me help you up, Mom," she said, taking my elbow. Her grip was firm, steering. I allowed it. I let my step falter just a little on the first stair. I leaned into her support. "Thank you, dear. My knees aren't what they used to be." "I know, Mom," she said, her voice thick with a pity that was really just condescension. "That's why we're here, to help." She led me to my bedroom door. She opened it for me as if I were incapable. "Sleep well. We'll see you in the morning." "Good night, Vanessa," I said softly. I closed the door. I listened to her footsteps retreat down the hall. Then I straightened. The slight stoop left my shoulders. I walked to my dresser, my steps silent on the rug. In the dim light, I looked at my reflection, my rich brown skin, my crown of silver gray hair, neat and elegant. The eyes that looked back at me were not tired. They were awake. They were clear. The party was over. The performance was concluded. I had smiled. I had thanked them. I had let them think they were in control. It was, I thought as I turned from the mirror, a satisfactory first move. The opening gambit in a game they did not yet know we were playing. They had shown me their hand. Now it was my turn. I had decided in that moment at the table that I would not react. Reaction is emotion. Response is strategy. This was my response. It had begun with a smile. It would not end with one. I stood in the quiet of my bedroom for several minutes, listening to the house. The muffled sounds of them cleaning up in the kitchen, the low murmur of the television from the living room. They had settled in. They assumed the night and the morning would follow a predictable course. I was the variable they had dismissed. The first phase was complete. I had observed, and I had not reacted. Now began the second, preparation. I changed out of my birthday dress into a simple pair of trousers and a sweater. The clothes were practical, soft and dark. I sat at my small writing desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of old stationery, was a black, leather-bound address book. Its cover was worn smooth at the edges. I had not used it in years, preferring the contacts list on my phone, but I had never discarded it. Some connections, I had always felt, are too important to be left to the fragility of a digital device. I flipped through the pages, the paper thin and slightly yellowed. My finger found the name, Arthur Finley. His office number, his home number, his cell number, all in my precise cursive from over a decade ago. Arthur had been my late husband's friend and our family lawyer for 40 years. He had handled David's will. He had helped me with the title to this house. He was a man of discretion, and more importantly, he was a man who understood the law without sentimentality. I picked up the landline phone from my bedside table. Its cord was long, allowing me to move to the window while I dialed. I looked out at the dark garden. The motion-sensitive light by the shed was off. Everything was still. The cell number rang 3 times before he answered. Arthur Finley. "Arthur, it's Eleanor Beaumont." There was a brief pause. "Eleanor, it's been a long time. Is everything all right?" His voice was alert, concerned. He was not a man for social calls. "Not entirely," I said, keeping my voice low and even. "I require your counsel, a matter of some urgency concerning my home and my personal property." "I'm listening." "My family is here for my birthday. My daughter, Vanessa, my son, Marcus, my granddaughter, Alicia. They are currently asleep in my guest rooms." I paused, choosing my words with the care I once used to catalog rare books. "This evening, before I entered the room, I overheard them discussing the division of my jewelry collection, my emerald necklace, my pearls, my mother's bangle. They had laid the items out on the sideboard. My daughter told my granddaughter she could have a piece when I was, and I quote, "too old to remember she owns it." They are operating under the assumption that I am non-compos mentis or soon will be. Arthur made a soft, disapproving sound. "I see. And how did you respond?" I thanked them for the cake and pretended I hadn't heard the crux of it. They believe I am oblivious or passively compliant. "What is your desired outcome, Eleanor?" This was the question. I had known it would come. I watched a lone car's headlights sweep across the ceiling of the room opposite. I desire for them to leave my home and not return uninvited. I desire for them to understand, in a way they cannot ignore or explain away as confusion, that I am of sound mind and that their actions have consequences. I wish to establish a legal and physical boundary, permanently. You're talking about a restraining order? Eviction? If necessary. They are here as guests. I want that status revoked. I want them declared trespassers. Tonight, they feel like heirs. By tomorrow morning, I want them to feel like intruders. I could almost hear him thinking, the rustle of papers. Do you have evidence of their intentions? Witnesses? I have my home security system. It has audio capability in the main living areas. The cameras are discreet. I believe the entire conversation from before I entered the dining room was recorded. I also have their subsequent conversation at the table, where my daughter reiterated her statement about my memory. That is compelling, Arthur said. You've had that system for a while. Since David passed, for safety, it seems it will serve a different purpose now. What is your immediate plan? Tonight, I will secure the most critical personal documents and download the footage from the system. Tomorrow, very early, I will leave. I will have the locks changed. Then, I will contact the police from a neutral location. I will present the footage and formally report unauthorized persons in my home. I will need you to be available to speak with the police if required and to begin whatever civil actions are warranted. There was a longer silence. Eleanor, this is a severe course. It will likely burn every bridge you have with your children. Arthur, I said, my voice firm. They lit the match. They were simply counting on me being too frail to feel the heat. I am merely showing them that I can not only feel it, but that I control the fire department. A faint, dry chuckle came down the line. Very well. You have always been the most prepared person I know. Email the footage to me as soon as you have it. I will review it. My phone will be on from 6 a.m. onward. Call me when you are safe and ready to proceed with the police. I will support your statements. Thank you, Arthur. Be careful, Eleanor. People who feel entitled can become unpredictable when that entitlement is threatened. I am counting on it, I replied. Good night. I hung up the phone. The connection severed. The room felt larger, quieter. The plan was no longer just a cold comfort in my mind. It was now a shared, actionable strategy. I had a collaborator. I opened my bedroom door a crack. The hallway was dark, save for the nightlight near the bathroom. I could hear the deep, regular breathing of Marcus from the first guest room. A faint blue glow seeped from under the door of the second room, Vanessa or Alessia on a phone. I moved silently past them, down the stairs. The house was different at night. The familiar shapes of furniture became silhouettes. I did not turn on any lights. I knew the path to my study by muscle memory. I closed the door behind me and engaged the simple lock. Only then did I turn on the brass desk lamp. The room was as I had left it. Books lined the walls. My late husband's large oak desk dominated the space. My computer, a modern, sleek contrast to the old wood, sat on a corner. I woke it up and navigated to the security system portal. The interface was simple. I selected the camera feed for the dining room and rewound to the time just before I had entered the party. There they were, in clear monochrome. Vanessa holding up the necklace, Marcus by the window, Alicia, a blurry figure of discomfort. I turned up the volume. Vanessa's voice tinny but intelligible through the computer's speakers. Dividing. It's the perfect time. We're all here. I let it play. I watched myself enter the frame, saw my own forced smile. I fast-forwarded, stopping at the moment at the cake table. I amplified the audio. You can have that bangle there when Mom's too old to remember she owns it. We have to be practical. I highlighted the clip from the first discussion to the end of the second. I saved it as a single file. I inserted a flash drive into the computer and copied the file onto it. The transfer was quick. I labeled the drive with a small piece of masking tape, B-Day. Then I opened my document safe, a fireproof box on the lower shelf. I removed my passport, the deed to the house, my marriage certificate, David's death certificate, and the most recent will Arthur had drawn up for me. I placed them in a large manila envelope. From my desk drawer, I took a small locked jewelry case, not the one in my dressing room, but a plain one I used for travel. Into it, I placed only a few items: my wedding band, my mother's thin gold wedding band, and the simple pearl studs David had given me on our first anniversary. Nothing they would look for, nothing they had coveted, just the pieces that were mine, truly mine, in a way that had nothing to do with monetary value. I placed the envelope and the jewelry case into my everyday tote bag, which hung on the back of the door. I added the flash drive, my address book, and my medication. I zipped the bag closed. For a moment, I sat in my desk chair. I looked at the books, at David's old fountain pen still in its holder. This room was the center of me, my mind's home. They had not come in here. They never did. To them, it was just the old study, a relic. Their disregard was my advantage. I turned off the lamp and unlocked the door. The house was silent now, the blue glow under the guest room door extinguished. I moved back upstairs, my tote bag over my shoulder, its weight a comfort. Back in my bedroom, I placed the bag by the closet. I set my alarm for 4:45 a.m. I did not go to bed. Instead, I sat in the armchair by the window, a blanket over my legs, and watched the night. I cataloged the steps ahead, each one a logical progression from the last. The call to the locksmith was scheduled for 5:30 a.m., using a service I had booked online on my phone while sitting in the dark. A taxi would arrive at 5:45. The smile I had worn at the party was gone. My face in the window's reflection was calm, impassive, a map of lines and wisdom they had chosen not to read. The storm was not coming. It was already here. I was its eye, perfectly still. And soon, very soon, the winds would reach their door. The alarm on my phone vibrated on the bedside table at 4:45 a.m. I had not slept, but the silent pulse was my signal to move. I stood from the chair, my body stiff but obedient. I changed into the clothes I had laid out, a pair of comfortable walking shoes, a warm jacket. I picked up my tote bag, its contents a quiet testament to my preparedness. I added a small suitcase I had packed days before for a hypothetical trip. A few changes of clothes, toiletries, a novel. It was a prop, but a useful one. It made my departure look planned for other reasons. The house was a vault of deep, sleeping silence. I moved down the stairs with practiced care, avoiding the one squeaky step near the bottom. In the kitchen, the velvet pouch still sat on the counter. I did not touch it. Let it be found there, a symbol of their assumption. My winter coat hung by the back door. I put it on, transferred my essentials to its deep pockets, and left the tote and suitcase by the door. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound was a sharp metallic clunk in the quiet. I paused, listening. No stirring from upstairs. I slipped outside into the pre-dawn chill. The air was cold and clean, smelling of damp earth and frost. My breath made small clouds. The sky was just beginning to lighten from black to a deep indigo in the east. I walked down the driveway to the curb. At 5:30 precisely, a white van with a local locksmith's logo pulled up. A man in his 50s wearing a work jacket got out. "Mrs. Beaumont?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes, thank you for coming so early." "No problem. You said all exterior locks?" "Everyone. Front door, back door, the side door to the garage, and the garage overhead door mechanism. I want new keys for all of them." He gave a firm nod. "We'll get it done. Might take an hour or so. You'll want to wait inside?" "I'll wait here," I said, gesturing to the driveway. "I need the air." He didn't question it. He fetched his toolbox from the van and got to work. I stood a distance away, watching the house. The sound of his tools was rhythmic, deliberate. The drilling out of old cylinders, the testing of new mechanisms, each click whir of a new lock engaging was a stitch closing a wound. At 5:45, a taxi rounded the corner, its yellow light off. I signaled to the driver. I went inside just long enough to retrieve my suitcase and tote bag from by the door. I did not look back into the depths of the house. I closed the back door behind me. The locksmith was working on the front door lock. He held up the old set of keys, a familiar ring I had carried for 20 years. "These are done for," he said. "Dispose of them," I replied. I got into the taxi. "The Willows Hotel, please, on Elm Street." The driver nodded and pulled away from the curb. I did not look out the back window. I watched the streets of my neighborhood pass by, the houses dark, their occupants still asleep in their own versions of peace. We reached the small boutique hotel 10 minutes later. I had made the reservation online in my study. I paid the driver and walked into the quiet lobby. A young man at the front desk checked me in efficiently. My room was on the ground floor at the back. It was neutral, clean, and temporary. I placed my suitcase on the stand. I took the envelope of documents and the flash drive from my coat pocket and laid them on the desk. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and called Arthur Finley. He answered on the first ring. "Eleanor." "I am at the Willows Hotel. The locks are being changed as we speak. The house is empty save for my 3 overnight guests who are now locked inside." "Excellent. And the footage?" "In my possession. I will email it to you now." "Do that. Then I advise you to call the non-emergency police line. Report that you have left your home for your safety and that there are individuals inside whom you did not authorize to remain beyond their invitation, which you have now revoked. State that you believe they intend to remove property. Mention the security footage. Be calm, be factual. I will be ready when they call." "Thank you, Arthur." I hung up, connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi, and sent the video file to Arthur's secure email. I noted the time in my mind. It was 6:20 a.m. Then I dialed the non-emergency number for the local police department. A dispatcher answered. "My name is Eleanor Beaumont. I live at 2147 Crestview Lane. I am calling to report a trespassing situation." My voice was steady, as if I were giving a reference at the library. I explained, precisely, that my adult children and granddaughter had been invited for a birthday celebration, that I had revoked their invitation to stay the night after, overhearing discussions about dividing my personal property without my consent, that I had left my home this morning for my own peace of mind and had secured the property by changing the locks, that the individuals were now inside, locked in, without my permission to be there, that I had audio-visual evidence of their stated intentions. I provided names and descriptions. The dispatcher's tone shifted from routine to attentive. "And you are sure they are still inside, ma'am?" "Yes. Their cars are in the driveway. They have no reason to leave yet, and they do not yet know the locks have been changed. An officer will be dispatched to the address. Can you meet them there?" "I can be there in 10 minutes. Please do. The officer will meet you outside." I put my coat back on. I left my suitcase in the room, taking only my purse with the documents and the flash drive. I called for another taxi. As I waited in the hotel lobby, I felt a profound stillness. The frantic, hurt energy of the night before was gone. It had been refined into purpose. This was no longer about emotion. It was a procedure. I was following the steps, as one would follow a recipe or an instruction manual. The taxi arrived. I gave my home address. As we drove, the sun finally breached the horizon, casting long, sharp shadows. The world was waking up. My family would be waking up too. They would stumble to the kitchen, expecting coffee, expecting me to be there, frail and accommodating. They would find the velvet pouch. They might feel a twinge of guilt, quickly smothered by their own justification. "We're helping. She needs us to manage things." They would try the back door for the morning paper. It would not open. Confusion, then annoyance, then the slow, cold drip of realization. The taxi turned onto my street. I saw the police cruiser first, parked behind Vanessa's sedan. 2 officers, a man and a woman, stood on the front walk looking at the house. The locksmith's van was gone. My house sat there, looking precisely as it always did, yet fundamentally altered. The new locks were invisible from the outside, but I knew they were there. A silent, unyielding barrier. I paid the driver and got out. The crisp morning air felt different here. It felt charged. The female officer turned as I approached. "Mrs. Beaumont." "Yes, officer." "We received your call. Can you confirm these vehicles belong to the individuals inside?" "The silver sedan is my daughter Vanessa's. The blue SUV is my son Marcus's." "And you changed the locks this morning, revoking their permission to be on the property?" "I did. They were invited guests for a dinner party. That invitation concluded. Their continued presence is without my consent." The male officer nodded, his hand resting on his duty belt. "All right, ma'am. We'll need to make contact, verify your statement, and ask them to leave." "I understand," I said. The officers approached the front door. The female officer rang the doorbell. I stood back on the public sidewalk and waited. I could imagine the scene unfolding inside, the surprise at the early chime, the assumption it was a delivery, the growing puzzle as the front door handle refused to turn. This was the moment the theory became practice. The plan touched reality. I watched the door. My heart beat a slow, firm rhythm in my chest, not with fear, but with focus. The performance was over. The curtain was up. And for the first time, they were about to see the true stage manager. The front door opened inward. It was Vanessa who pulled it, her face a mask of bewildered irritation that froze the moment she saw the two police officers. She was dressed in yesterday's clothes, her hair flat on one side. Behind her, I could see Marcus peering over her shoulder, and further back, Alicia, wrapped in a blanket. "Can I help you?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight. "Good morning. I'm Officer Jenkins. This is Officer Ruiz. We're here at the request of the homeowner, Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont. Are you Vanessa Beaumont?" "Yes, I'm her daughter. What's this about? Is my mother okay?" The concern in her voice was automatic, performative. Her eyes darted past the officers and found me standing on the sidewalk. Her confusion deepened. "Your mother is fine. She's right there," Officer Jenkins said, nodding in my direction. "She has informed us that she has revoked your permission to be on this property. We're here to ask you and the other occupants to leave." Vanessa stared at him, then at me. A short, disbelieving laugh escaped her. "What? That's ridiculous. This is my mother's house. We're her family. We stayed over after her birthday party. There's been a misunderstanding." She raised her voice, directing it at me. "Mom, what's going on? Did you call the police?" I remained where I was, my hands in my coat pockets, one closed around the flash drive. I said nothing. This was not my conversation to have yet. Officer Ruiz spoke, her tone patient but firm. "Ma'am, the homeowner states that your invitation was for a dinner party last evening, and that she has since withdrawn consent for your continued presence. We need you, your son, and your granddaughter to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises." Marcus pushed forward now, his face pale. "Officer, please, this is our mother. She's getting older. There might be some confusion on her part. We're just here to help her." "She told us you would say that," Officer Jenkins replied evenly. He glanced at a small notebook. "She specifically mentioned you might claim she was confused or non-compos mentis. Her words." The color drained from Marcus's face. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. I saw the first flicker of real alarm in her eyes. The script they had written for me, the confused, frail old woman, was being recited back to them by a stranger in uniform. "This is insane," Vanessa said, her voice rising. "Mom, tell them. Tell them this is a mistake." She took a step forward, onto the porch. "Ma'am, please stay where you are," Officer Ruiz said, her posture shifting slightly. "You need to comply with the request to leave. If you do not, you will be trespassing, and we will have to take you into custody." Trespassing? In my own mother's house? Vanessa's composure was cracking, giving way to a furious, entitled panic. "She can't do this. We have things here, our things." "You are welcome to retrieve your personal items, clothing, toiletries, nothing else. The homeowner will determine what constitutes your personal property. We will supervise." It was then that I walked forward. The crunch of my shoes on the gravel path was the only sound. I stopped beside Officer Jenkins. I looked at my daughter, at my son, at my granddaughter hovering in the foyer. Their expressions were a tableau of shock, anger, and dawning horror. "These are the individuals," I said to the officers, my voice clear in the morning air. "Vanessa, Marcus, and Alicia. They have no legal right to be here." "Mom, why are you doing this?" Marcus's question was a whisper full of genuine hurt. I turned my gaze to him. "You know why, Marcus? You were in the room." Vanessa found her voice again, a sharp legalistic tone. "She's not in her right mind. She's elderly. She's acting erratically. You can't take her word for this. We need to call her doctor. We need to—" I withdrew my hand from my pocket. In my palm was the small black flash drive. I held it out to Officer Jenkins. "This is digital evidence from my home security system. It contains audio and video from last evening, my birthday party. It corroborates my statement that these individuals were discussing and planning the division of my personal property without my knowledge or consent. It also contains a statement from my daughter indicating she believes I am too old to remember my own possessions. Their words provide the context for my decision to revoke their access." Officer Jenkins took the drive. "You have a way to play this?" "I do," I said. I produced my phone. "It has a standard USB-C port. I can provide the adapter." Vanessa made a strangled sound. "You recorded us. In your own home." "For security," I replied, my eyes still on the officer. "It seems it was a prudent investment." Officer Ruiz took the drive and my phone, connecting them with the small adapter from my purse. She turned the screen so she and her partner could view it, angling it away from the house. They stood close together, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of the screen. I could not see it, but I knew what they were hearing. Vanessa's voice crisp and planning, my own entrance, the later damning comment at the cake table. The officer's expressions changed. The professional neutrality remained, but it solidified into something harder. Officer Jenkins' jaw tightened. Officer Ruiz glanced up at Vanessa with a look of plain disdain. Vanessa saw it. Her confidence crumbled. "Whatever is on there, it's out of context. We were just talking. It was a family conversation." "About dividing her jewelry before she's too old to remember," Officer Ruiz stated, not as a question but as a fact she had just verified. The silence that followed was absolute. The birds had stopped singing. Marcus looked at the ground. His shoulders slumped. Alicia, in the doorway, had tears streaming silently down her face. Vanessa stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering though the morning was not that cold. Officer Jenkins handed the phone and drive back to me. "That is compelling evidence, Mrs. Beaumont. What would you like to do?" I looked at my family. The hurt was a physical pressure in my chest, but I kept it walled away. This was not about hurt. This was about consequence. "I want them to leave my property," I said. "They may collect their personal belongings from the bedrooms and bathrooms, 1 bag each. You will supervise. They are to take nothing that belongs to the house or to me. The jewelry they were discussing is in a velvet pouch on the kitchen counter. It stays. After they have gathered their things, I want them to leave, and if they attempt to return without my express written invitation, I wish to press charges for trespassing. I will be filing a report for attempted theft based on that footage, and my lawyer will be in touch." Vanessa's eyes were wide, glassy with a mix of rage and terror. "You can't be serious. Mom, you'll be alone. You need us." "I needed you to be my children," I said, the words falling like stones. "You chose to be my appraisers. Now you are trespassers. The choice was always yours." Officer Jenkins nodded. "All right, you 3, inside, 1 bag. Clothes and essentials only. We'll be right here. Let's go." He gestured for them to move. Slowly, as if in a dream, they turned and shuffled back into the house they had assumed was already partly theirs. The officers followed them in, leaving the front door open. I stayed on the walkway. I did not need to see the rest. I could imagine the scene, the sullen silence, the rushed, angry packing, the officers' watchful eyes. I looked at my home. The morning sun was fully on the front facade now, warming the brick. It looked peaceful. It looked like mine again. The operation was silent no longer. The evidence had been presented. The law was now an extension of my will. The reclaiming was underway, and it was as cold, clean, and irreversible as the turning of a new lock. I stood on the walkway until they emerged. Officer Ruiz came out first, holding the door. Then Marcus, carrying a duffel bag, his eyes red-rimmed and fixed on the ground. Alicia followed, a backpack slung over one shoulder, her face pale and tear-streaked. She hugged herself, looking like a child who had been caught in a downpour. Vanessa came last, clutching a leather weekend bag. Her face was a rigid mask of fury, but her hands were trembling. The officers escorted them to their cars. Marcus went to his SUV without a word, not looking at anyone. He got in and started the engine, staring straight ahead through the windshield. Alicia hesitated beside her mother's sedan. She turned, her eyes searching for me. When they met mine, she opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it. A fresh tear traced a path down her cheek. She got into the passenger seat and shut the door. Vanessa did not move toward her car. She stood on the driveway facing me, with Officer Jenkins between us. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and shaking. "You are sick, Mother. You need help. We will get a competency hearing. We will get guardianship. You can't do this." "The driveway is part of my property, Vanessa," I replied. "You are currently trespassing. Officer..." Officer Jenkins touched her elbow lightly. "Ma'am, you need to leave now." Vanessa jerked her arm away. She pointed a finger at me. "You will regret this. You will be alone, and you will call us, and we will remember this." "I have always been alone in the ways that matter most," I said. "Now, it will simply be a fact, not a suspicion. Goodbye, Vanessa." She turned on her heel, her shoes scraping on the asphalt. She slammed her car door with such force the vehicle rocked. A moment later, both cars reversed out of my driveway. They paused at the end of the street as if conferring, then turned in opposite directions and disappeared. The silence they left behind was immense. It was not peaceful, not yet. It was a silence ringing with the echoes of slammed doors and harsh words. The two officers turned to me. "We'll file the report," Officer Ruiz said. "The trespass warning is logged. If any of them return without your permission, you call 911 immediately. Do you feel safe to re-enter your home?" "I do," I said. "Thank you for your professionalism." "The evidence was clear," Officer Jenkins said. He handed me a business card. "Here's the case number. Your lawyer can contact the detective listed on the back for the full report. Take care, Mrs. Beaumont." They returned to their cruiser and drove away. I was alone on my property. The morning sun was higher now, warm on my back. I looked at my house. It was just a house again, not a contested territory. I walked to the front door. I used the new key. It turned smoothly with a solid, satisfying thunk. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Their coffee, their shampoo, the lingering scent of Marcus's aftershave. It was an invasion of familiar foreignness. I walked through the foyer into the living room. Cushions were askew on the sofa. A blanket was tossed over a chair. In the dining room, the birthday streamers hung limply. The empty cake plate sat on the table, forks smeared with dried chocolate. I did not clean. Not yet. I went to the kitchen. The velvet pouch was still on the counter. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. I loosened the drawstring and poured the contents onto the clean granite. My jewelry spilled out, a glittering, tangled heap. The emeralds, the pearls, the gold. I separated each piece, laying them out in a line. I inspected them. They were unharmed. They were just objects. But they were my objects. I gathered them one by one and carried them upstairs to my bedroom. I did not put them back in the jewelry box on my dresser. That felt too obvious, too expected. I went to my closet and retrieved a small, fireproof safe I kept on the top shelf behind a stack of sweaters. I opened it. Inside were my passport, the deed, the documents I had already copied. I placed the jewelry inside, closed the door, and spun the dial. I returned the safe to its hiding place. Then I began the process of reclamation. It was methodical, physical work. I took down every birthday streamer, rolling the tape off the walls. I gathered the paper plates and plastic forks and put them in the trash. I washed the cake plate and the good glasses they had used. I straightened every cushion. I folded the blanket and put it in the linen closet. I opened windows in the living room and kitchen, letting the cold, fresh air sweep through, carrying their smells away. It took 2 hours. When I was finished, the house was clean. It was quiet. It was mine. The only sign of the previous night was a faint indentation in the carpet where the sideboard had been pulled out to display the jewelry. I pushed the heavy piece of furniture back into place, erasing the mark. My body ached with fatigue, but my mind was clear. I knew I could not stay here tonight. The house felt like a crime scene that had just been scrubbed. The memories were too fresh, the silence too new. I needed the neutral ground of the hotel. I went to my study. I called Arthur. "It's done," I said when he answered. "They are gone. The police filed a report. I have the case number." "I received the footage," Arthur said. His voice was crisp, all business now. "It's damning. It clearly shows intent. I can proceed with a civil suit for attempted conversion. That's the legal term for trying to exercise ownership over someone else's property. It would tie them up in court and send a very clear message. But that is your decision. The police report is the first step. It establishes a record." "What would a lawsuit achieve?" I asked, sitting in my desk chair. "It would formalize the breach. It would force them to acknowledge in a legal setting what they did. It could result in financial damages, but more importantly, it would be a permanent public record of their actions. It is the nuclear option, Eleanor. There would be no coming back from it." I considered this. I looked at David's pen in its holder. "For now, hold the footage and the police report. Keep them ready. I do not want a lawsuit today. I want the threat of one to be absolute. I want them to know it exists, that I can activate it at any time. That is the power I want." "Understood, a sword of Damocles, often more effective than the blow itself. I will draft a letter. It will state that we are in possession of the evidence and are considering legal action. It will advise them to seek their own counsel and to cease all contact with you unless initiated by you. It will be a cease and desist in all but name. I will send it to each of them." "Yes," I said, "do that." "Where will you be?" "At the Willows Hotel for a night or two. Then I will come home." "Very well. I'll be in touch when the letters are sent. And Eleanor?" "Yes?" "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this, and I am impressed." I did not know what to say to that. I thanked him and hung up. I walked through my clean, silent house once more, turning off the lights I had turned on. I collected my purse and my coat. At the front door, I paused. I listened to the quiet. It was no longer ringing. It was settling. I locked the door with my new key. I got into my own car, which had been parked in the garage, untouched by the morning's drama. I drove back to the hotel. The temporary room was a relief. It asked nothing of me. It held no history. I ordered tea and a sandwich from room service. I ate at the small desk, looking at nothing. The physical reclamation was complete. The legal machinery was in motion. The emotional reckoning was a private matter, a debt I might never collect, but whose terms I had now firmly, finally set. I had changed the locks on my doors. I had also, I realized, changed the locks on my heart. The mechanism felt similar, a definitive click, a new key, and the absolute certainty that some things would never open again. I spent the remainder of that day at the Willows Hotel. The room was a capsule, separate from the world I had overturned. I did not turn on the television. I read a few pages of my novel, but found I could not concentrate. My mind was not racing. It was simply alert, waiting for the repercussions I knew must come. My phone, face down on the nightstand, remained silent for several hours. I imagined the frantic conversations happening elsewhere. Vanessa and Marcus comparing their shock, crafting their narratives. Alicia caught in the middle. They would be trying to decide what to do next. They would be realizing, perhaps for the first time, that I was an opponent, not a subject. The first contact came in the late afternoon. It was a text message from Marcus. It read, "Mom, we need to talk, please. This is all a terrible misunderstanding." I read it. I did not reply. A misunderstanding requires a lack of understanding. They had understood perfectly. They had simply expected no consequence. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. I watched it vibrate against the wood until it stopped. She did not leave a voicemail. A moment later, a text from her arrived. "Call me now. This is not funny." I put the phone back down. It was not meant to be funny. It was meant to be final. The next call was from a number I did not recognize, but the area code was local. I let it go to voicemail. After a minute, I listened to the message. "Mrs. Beaumont, this is Dr. Evans's office calling. Your daughter, Vanessa Beaumont, has contacted us expressing concern about your well-being following a recent incident. She has requested a wellness check and an urgent cognitive evaluation. Could you please call us back to schedule an appointment at your earliest convenience? Thank you." My hand was steady as I saved the message. This was Vanessa's first countermove, the competency play. I had anticipated it. Arthur had anticipated it. It was a predictable, almost pathetic attempt to regain the upper hand by medicalizing my defiance. I called Arthur immediately. "Vanessa has contacted my doctor's office," I said without preamble. "She is requesting a cognitive evaluation." Arthur sighed, a dry sound. Also predictable. "Dr. Evans is your primary care physician?" "For 15 years. His opinion of your mental acuity?" "At my last physical 3 months ago, he told me I was sharper than most of his residents. He has my recent blood work, my clean bill of health. He knows I live independently." "Good. I will call his office. I will inform them that you are my client, that you are of sound mind, and that any such request from a family member is part of a contentious legal dispute. I will advise them that releasing any information without your written consent would be a HIPAA violation. I will also send them a copy of the police report for context. That should shut it down at the practice level." "Thank you, Arthur. The letters are drafted. I will send them via certified mail this evening. They will receive them tomorrow. That should clarify the situation for them." After I hung up, I felt a layer of tension ease. The bureaucratic defenses were being erected. This was why one hired a professional. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Alicia. It was longer than the others. "Grandma, I am so sorry. I didn't want any of it. I didn't say anything because I was scared. I should have said something. What Mom did was wrong. What we all did was wrong. I don't know what to do. Please just tell me you're okay." I read it twice. The pain in it was genuine, unvarnished by strategy or anger. She was the only one who had apologized. She was the only one who had framed it as a moral failure, not a logistical error. According to the outline of my own life I had written in my head, she was the one who might find her way back. But not today. Today, any response would be a breach in the wall I had built. It would be analyzed, dissected, reported to Vanessa. It would be seen as a point of entry. I did not reply, but I did not delete the message. I saved it. For later, perhaps. I ordered dinner from room service. Soup and bread. As I ate, I considered my next move. Staying at the hotel for another night was wise. It created distance, both physical and psychological. It allowed the dust to settle. It allowed the certified letters to land. After dinner, I called the front desk and extended my stay for 2 more nights. Then I prepared for bed. The routine was mundane: washing my face, brushing my teeth, laying out clothes for the morning. These simple acts, grounded me. They were proof of my own ongoing autonomous existence. Just before I turned out the light, my phone lit up once more. Not a call, but an email notification. The sender was Marcus. The subject line was, "For Mom." I opened it. There was no greeting. Mom, I have replayed yesterday 100 times. I heard what Vanessa said. I saw the jewelry on the table. I did nothing. I told myself it was just talk, that it didn't matter, that you wouldn't mind. But I knew that was a lie. I was cowardly. I am so ashamed. When the police came, I felt sick. Not because of them, but because you had to call them, to make us hear you. That is my failure. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it. I am staying at a hotel. I can't face Vanessa right now. I just needed to tell you this. I am sorry. Marcus. I read his words. They were not legalistic. They were not defensive. They were an admission of guilt, pure and simple. They confirmed what I had suspected. His complicity was born of weakness, not malice. It did not excuse it, but it explained it. Again, I did not reply. But his email, like Alicia's text, was stored, not as a tool, but as a piece of data, a point on a graph that might, in some future I could not yet see, indicate a change in trajectory. I turned off the light. In the dark, the silence of the hotel room was complete. It was different from the silence of my house. This silence had no memory. It held no echoes of birthday parties or raised voices. It was a blank page. I lay awake for a long time. I did not think of the past. I thought of the next day and the day after that. I thought of the letters traveling through the postal system, their contents like sealed verdicts. I thought of returning to my house, not as a retreat, but as a reoccupation. The knock at the door had come and gone. The police had been and left. Now the real confrontation was beginning. It was not happening with shouting on a porch. It was happening in doctors' offices, in email inboxes, in the quiet, terrible space between what they had assumed and what was now true. They were waking up hour by hour to the new world I had built, and in this new world they were strangers. I returned home on the third morning. The hotel had served its purpose as a bunker, but a bunker is not a home. The air in my house was still, but it no longer felt haunted. It felt empty in the way a clean slate is empty. I put fresh linens on my bed. I made a pot of tea. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the local newspaper. The ordinary acts were a declaration. Arthur called mid-morning. The letters were delivered an hour ago. Signed receipts are coming back to my office. I also spoke with Dr. Evans's practice manager. They will not be scheduling any evaluations. They have noted your file that any requests must come directly from you with verification. That avenue is closed. Thank you. Now we wait for their response. Or, more accurately, we see what they do next. What they did next was not a unified front. That became clear within the hour. My landline rang. I let the machine pick up. It was Vanessa. Her voice was strained, attempting a calm she did not feel. Mother, I received a letter from your attorney. This is outrageous. We need to have a rational conversation, without lawyers and police. Call me back, please. The please was an afterthought, sharp with frustration. I erased the message. My cell phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Got the letter. I understand. I won't contact you again unless you want me to. I'm so sorry. Then the front doorbell rang. I was not surprised. Vanessa preferred direct confrontation. I went to the door but did not open it. I looked through the peephole. She stood on the porch, alone, dressed in her work clothes, her arms crossed tightly against the cold. She looked older, lines of stress around her mouth that I had not noticed before. I did not open the door. I stood silently on the other side, waiting. She rang the bell again, a long, impatient press. Then she knocked, 3 firm raps. Mom, I know you're in there. Your car is here. We need to talk. I remained still. This is childish, she called through the door, her voice muffled but clear. You can't just shut us out. I got that. That threat from Arthur. What are you trying to do? You'll end up alone. Is that what you want?" I did not answer. My silence was my answer. She leaned closer to the door, her voice dropping, trying to sound reasonable. "Look, I'm sorry about the jewelry thing. It was tacky. It was insensitive. We were just thinking ahead, for the family. We didn't mean to upset you. Can we just start over? Open the door." Her apology was for the tackiness, not the intent. It was for upsetting me, not for betraying me. It was a negotiation tactic. I walked away from the door, back to the kitchen. I poured myself more tea. The knocking stopped. A moment later, my phone lit up with a call from her. I ignored it. I heard the sound of her heels on the porch steps, then the crunch of gravel as she walked away. A car door slammed. An engine started, the sound fading down the street. The house was quiet again. I finished my tea. I washed the cup. The next development came in the early afternoon. A car I did not recognize pulled into the driveway. A woman in a dark coat got out, carrying a clipboard. She walked to the front door and rang the bell. She had an official bearing. I went to the door. "Yes?" "Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont?" "I am. I'm Gail Frommer from Adult Protective Services. We've received a report expressing concern for your welfare and your capacity for self-care. May I come in to speak with you for a few moments?" So Vanessa had escalated, from the doctor to the state. It was a logical, if aggressive, move. I kept the chain on the door. "May I see your identification?" She held up a state-issued ID card and a badge. I examined them through the crack. They appeared genuine. I closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it fully. "Come in." She stepped into the foyer, her eyes taking in the clean, orderly living room. "Thank you. I won't take much of your time. The report indicates concerns about recent erratic behavior, changes in cognition, and possible self-neglect. Could you tell me about how you've been managing?" "Of course," I said, my voice calm. "Please have a seat. Would you like some water or tea?" "No, thank you." She sat on the edge of an armchair, poised to take notes. I sat opposite her. "I am 68 years old. I live alone. I am a retired librarian. My husband passed away 12 years ago. I manage my own finances, my own medications, my own household. I drove myself to the grocery store yesterday. I have no diagnosed cognitive conditions. My last physical was 3 months ago, and I was in excellent health. The report you received was filed by my daughter, Vanessa Beaumont, following an incident 2 days ago." "What was the nature of the incident?" she asked, her pen hovering. "It was my birthday. My children were here. I overheard them discussing the division of my personal jewelry, stating I would soon be too old to remember I owned it. I asked them to leave. They refused. I changed the locks and contacted the police to have them removed for trespassing. There is a police report, case number 45,782. My lawyer, Arthur Finley, has a copy of the security footage that captured their conversation. My daughter is now attempting to discredit my mental competence because I exercised my right to remove trespassers from my home." Gail Frommer's pen had stopped moving. She looked at me, really looked at me. She saw my clear eyes, my steady hands, the ordered room. "I see. And you have this police report number?" "I do." I recited it for her. "My lawyer's number is also on file with your office, I'm sure. He contacted Dr. Evans's practice this morning regarding a similar attempt." She nodded slowly, closing her notebook. "Mrs. Beaumont, these intra-family disputes are difficult. Our mandate is to protect vulnerable adults from abuse, including financial exploitation and coercion." "I believe I was the target of attempted financial exploitation," I said. "The police report and security footage support that. My response was to secure my person and my property. Does that sound like the action of someone incapable of self-care?" A faint professional smile touched her lips. "No, Mrs. Beaumont, it does not. It sounds like the action of someone who is very capable. I will note my observations and the police report number. The file will likely be closed. You should not receive further visits from our office based on this report. Thank you." She stood. I am sorry for the intrusion. It's not your fault. You were doing your job. I saw her out. As she left, she gave a small, sympathetic shake of her head. Not for me, I understood, but for the pettiness of families. I closed the door and locked it. I felt a surge of cold triumph. Vanessa's major offensive, the state, had been repelled with facts and paperwork. It had taken less than 15 minutes. The rest of the afternoon was quiet. The battle, it seemed, was moving from my porch to the realm of legal correspondence and filed reports. The physical and institutional threats were being neutralized, one by one. The silence in the house was no longer fragile. It was durable. It was the silence of a fortress that had withstood its first assaults. The walls were holding. The new locks had been tested. They worked. The day after the APS visit, my phone rang. It was Officer Jenkins. Mrs. Beaumont, we're finalizing the trespassing report. We'd like to get a formal signed statement from you. Would you be available to come down to the station this afternoon? It shouldn't take long. I am available, I said. What time? 2 o'clock would work. Also, if you could bring that flash drive with the security footage, our detectives would like to make a copy for the evidence file. It will strengthen the report considerably. I will bring it. I dressed with care. A charcoal gray wool dress, a single strand of my own pearls, not the ones they had coveted, low-heeled pumps. I applied a light touch of lipstick. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was composed, authoritative, and unassailable. I placed the flash drive in my purse alongside my wallet and keys. The police station was a low brick building on the other side of town. I had never been inside before. The lobby was fluorescent lit with scuffed linoleum floors and a tall desk behind protective glass. I gave my name to the clerk. A few minutes later, Officer Jenkins emerged from a secured door. He greeted me with a nod. Right this way, Mrs. Beaumont. We'll use one of the interview rooms. He led me down a hallway painted in a dull beige. The air smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. He opened the door to a small, windowless room containing a table and 4 chairs. Seated on one side were Vanessa and Marcus. I stopped in the doorway. I had not been informed they would be here. I looked at Officer Jenkins. They were also asked to come in to give their statements, he explained, his tone neutral. Separately, of course. We can use another room if you prefer. Vanessa stared at me, her eyes wide with a mix of outrage and what looked like fear. Marcus would not meet my gaze. He studied the surface of the table as if it were the most fascinating thing he had ever seen. This room is fine, I said. I took the seat opposite them. Officer Jenkins sat at the head of the table, placing a digital recorder and a notepad in front of him. This is an informal follow-up to the incident on Crestview Lane, he began. We are recording for accuracy. Mrs. Beaumont, you are here voluntarily to provide a statement? I am. And you, Ms. Beaumont, Mr. Beaumont, you are here voluntarily. Yes, Vanessa said. The word clipped. Marcus nodded silently. Mrs. Beaumont, in your own words, can you describe the events of the evening of your birthday and the following morning? I folded my hands on the table. On the evening of my birthday, I entered my dining room to find my children and granddaughter present. My jewelry collection was laid out on the sideboard. Before I entered, I overheard my daughter, Vanessa, using the word dividing in reference to the items. During the cake serving, she stated to my granddaughter, Alicia, that she could have a particular bangle when I was, and I quote, too old to remember she owns it. After the party, I asked them to leave. They did not. I felt my safety and my control over my property were compromised. The next morning, I left my home, changed the locks, and contacted your department to report unauthorized persons on my property. You responded and facilitated their removal. Vanessa shifted in her chair. That is a gross distortion of events. Officer Jenkins held up a hand. You'll have your turn, ma'am. Mrs. Beaumont, you mentioned evidence. I opened my purse and retrieved the small black flash drive. I placed it on the table between us. This is a digital copy of the relevant footage from my home security system. It has audio capability. It captures the conversation before I entered the room and the specific statement at the table. It corroborates my account precisely." He picked up the drive. "And you consent to this being entered into evidence?" "I do." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice tight. "That footage is a private family conversation. It's an invasion of privacy. It's taken out of context." "Or were you in your mother's home at the time?" Officer Jenkins asked. "Well, yes, but did you have an expectation of privacy in her common areas, knowing there was a security system?" She faltered. I didn't think she was spying on us." "I was not spying," I said, my voice even. "The system is for security. It recorded a security breach. The breach was your intention to assume control of my assets." "It was just talk," Vanessa insisted, her composure cracking. "We were brainstorming, planning for the future. She's twisting it." "Ms. Beaumont," Officer Jenkins said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "the content of the recording will be evaluated. We have your mother's statement that she felt threatened and exploited. The recording will either support or contradict that. Now, do you wish to give your formal statement?" Vanessa looked from the officer to the flash drive to me. The reality of the situation seemed to solidify in the sterile air of the room. This was not a family argument. This was a police interview. Her words, her very tone, were now evidence in a file. "I have nothing to say," she whispered, sinking back into her chair. "I want a lawyer." "That is your right," Officer Jenkins said, making a note. "Mr. Beaumont, your statement." Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked at me, and the shame in his face was so profound it was almost physical. "My mother's account is accurate," he said, his voice hoarse. "I was there. I heard what Vanessa said. I did nothing to stop it. I am responsible for my inaction." He dropped his head into his hands. Vanessa stared at him as if he had struck her. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "Telling the truth," he mumbled into his palms. Officer Jenkins was quiet for a moment, his pen poised above his pad. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said, turning back to me, "with this evidence and these statements, the report will clearly indicate attempted financial exploitation and trespass. The district attorney's office will review it for potential charges. What is your desired outcome?" This was the moment I had planned for. The calm, the evidence, the trap, all of it led here. I looked at my children. Vanessa was rigid with a fury that had nowhere to go. Marcus was broken. I felt nothing for them in that moment. They were figures in a process. "My desired outcome," I said, the words clear and measured in the quiet room, "is for the law to run its course. I want a formal trespass order against all 3 individuals. I want the report to stand as a matter of public record. I want them to understand that their actions have legal consequences, not just familial ones. I will leave the decision on criminal charges to the district attorney, guided by the evidence you now have." Vanessa made a small, choked sound. The color had left her face entirely. She was not a corporate strategist here. She was a suspect. Marcus did not move. "Understood," Officer Jenkins said. He switched off the recorder. "That concludes this interview. Mrs. Beaumont, thank you for your time. We will be in touch. Ms. Beaumont, Mr. Beaumont, you are free to go. I would strongly advise you to have no further contact with your mother unless through legal counsel." I stood. I collected my purse. I did not look at them again. I followed Officer Jenkins out of the room, back down the beige hallway, and into the lobby. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright. I took a deep breath. The formal statement was given. The evidence was surrendered. The machinery of the state was now engaged. It would grind slowly, but it would grind fine. I had not raised my voice. I had not shed a tear. I had simply presented the facts, and the facts had spoken with a louder, colder voice than I ever could. I drove home. The house was waiting, silent and secure. The new locks gleamed. Inside, everything was in its place. I had handed over the recording, but I had kept my peace, and in doing so, I had finally said everything that needed to be said. Several days passed in perfect quiet. The police report was filed. Arthur informed me that the district attorney's office was reviewing the case for potential charges. The certified letters had been received. There was no further contact from Vanessa. Marcus's email and Alicia's text remained unanswered in my phone, not deleted, but dormant. The silence was a tangible thing now, a space I inhabited without strain. I gardened. I read. I sorted through old photograph albums, not with sentimentality, but with the detached curiosity of an archivist. I was living the life they had assumed I was too diminished to manage, and I was managing it quite well. Then, on a cool, gray afternoon, the doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. Vanessa and Marcus stood on the porch. Vanessa's face was set in determined lines. Marcus looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped. Alicia was not with them. I did not open the door. I walked to the telephone in the kitchen and dialed the non-emergency number. I gave my name and address. The individuals who are the subject of the active trespass warning are at my door. I have not invited them. I would like them removed. The dispatcher said an officer would be dispatched. I returned to the foyer. I could hear them talking in low, urgent tones outside. Then, a knock. "Mother, please," Vanessa called, her voice trying for a placating tone and failing. "We need to talk. Just talk. 5 minutes." I said nothing. I waited. "Ellie, it's Marcus." His voice was softer, strained. "Please, we're not here to fight. We just want to understand." I remained silent. My understanding was complete. Theirs was the work that remained. A police cruiser arrived within 10 minutes. It was Officer Ruiz. She got out and approached the porch. I saw her speak to Vanessa and Marcus through the door. I heard the murmur of their voices, Vanessa's rising in protest. Then Officer Ruiz rang the bell. I opened the door. "Mrs. Beaumont," she said, "they're claiming they just want to speak with you." "They are violating the trespass warning," I said. "I want them to leave." Officer Ruiz nodded. She turned to them. "You need to leave the property now. This is your final warning." Vanessa stepped forward, ignoring the officer, her eyes locked on me. "This is your last chance to be reasonable. Do you really want to send your own children to court, to have a criminal record, over a misunderstanding?" "It was not a misunderstanding, Vanessa," I said, my voice calm. "It was an assessment. You assessed my worth, my capacity, and my property. You found me lacking and acted accordingly. I have merely agreed with your assessment of your own character." Marcus flinched as if struck. Vanessa's composure shattered. "You are a bitter, lonely old woman, and you will die alone because of this." Officer Ruiz put a hand up. "Ma'am, that's enough. You need to leave." "What are you going to do, arrest me?" Vanessa spat. "If you do not leave, yes." It was then that Officer Ruiz's radio crackled. She listened, then spoke into it. She looked at me. "The detective on your case is nearby. He's finishing up another call. He asked if he could stop by to get your final disposition on the charges. Is that all right?" "Yes," I said. We stood in a tense tableau on the porch. Vanessa glared, vibrating with fury. Marcus stared at the ground. Officer Ruiz stood between us, a solid blue-clad barrier. 5 minutes later, an unmarked sedan pulled up. A man in a suit, Detective Harris, got out. He had the file folder in his hand. He exchanged a quiet word with Officer Ruiz, then looked at the scene. Me, framed in my doorway, my 2 children on my porch, the officer. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said, "we've reviewed the evidence, the statements. It's a clear-cut case. Before we proceed, I need to ask you formally, what is your wish regarding charges?" Vanessa held her breath. Marcus looked up, his eyes pleading. I looked at them. I did not see my children in that moment. I saw the woman who had held my emerald necklace to the light and assigned it to her daughter. I saw the man who had watched from the window and chosen silence. I felt no anger. I felt a profound, weary disappointment that settled in my bones. I turned to Detective Harris. My voice was not loud, but it was absolute in the still air. "These people are not my family," I said. "A family shows love, not predation. They are vultures who saw a weakness that did not exist. I wish to press charges for trespassing. After my lawyer reviews the full case, we will likely proceed with charges for attempted theft. They may collect any remaining personal items from the porch. They are no longer welcome in my home." The words hung there. They were the words I had crafted in my mind. The final verdict. Vanessa's face went slack, then crumpled. All the fury bled out, replaced by a raw, uncomprehending horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She took a step back, as if physically pushed. Marcus made a low, choked sound. He covered his face with his hands, his body shaking. Detective Harris nodded, making a note on his file. "Understood, Mrs. Beaumont. Officer Ruiz, please see them off the property. If they have items here, they can get them now under supervision." Vanessa found her voice, a thin, broken thread. "You can't... You don't mean that." "I have never meant anything more," I said. Officer Ruiz guided them, stunned and silent, to their cars. Vanessa moved like a sleepwalker. Marcus stumbled after her. They did not look back. They got into Vanessa's car and sat there for a full minute before the engine started, and they drove away, slowly, as if lost. Detective Harris handed me his card. "My direct line. We'll be in touch as the case moves forward. You did the right thing, protecting yourself." "Thank you, Detective." He left. Officer Ruiz gave me a final nod and followed. I closed the door. I locked it. The deadbolt slid home with a solid, final thunk. I walked to the living room window and watched the empty street. The gray sky was beginning to clear at the edges, a thin line of blue on the horizon. The confrontation was over. The words had been spoken to the authorities in front of the perpetrators. The legal process would grind on, but the emotional climax had passed. The house was utterly silent. I felt the weight of the silence, but it was not heavy. It was light. It was the absence of a tension I had lived with for years, the tension of being patiently, quietly underestimated. That tension was gone. In its place was clarity and peace. I had pressed the charges. I had named them vultures. I had reclaimed my home, my dignity, and my story. The revenge was complete. It was not sweet. It was necessary. It was just. And as I turned from the window, I knew the only thing left to do was to live in the world I had just decisively won. I stood at the window until the street was empty again, until the last echo of the car engine had faded into the afternoon. The silence they left behind was different from the silence of their absence before. That had been a waiting silence. This was a concluded one. I turned from the window. The house was mine again, truly mine, in a way it had not been for years. The legalities would continue, but the war was over. The territory was secured. I went into the kitchen. The simple, familiar ritual was what I needed. I filled the kettle with fresh water and set it on the stove. I took down my favorite cup, a simple white ceramic one with a fine crack in the handle, a flaw I had always loved. I selected a tea bag, Earl Grey, the bergamot scent a comfort. I waited for the kettle to whistle, a rising keen that broke the quiet and then subsided as I poured the steaming water over the bag. I carried the cup to the living room. My chair was by the large window that looked out onto the back garden. It was an old armchair, upholstered in a faded blue fabric, shaped by decades of use. It was my husband's chair once. Now it was simply the chair. I sat down. The cushion yielded comfortably. I placed the cup on the small table beside me and let the tea steep. I did not think of Vanessa's crumpled face or Marcus's shaking shoulders. Those images were filed away, part of the record. I did not think of the jewelry in the safe or the new keys in my pocket. Those were tools now put aside. I looked at my garden. The autumn had turned the leaves gold and crimson. A squirrel chased another along the fence line. The sky had cleared completely, a pale, endless blue. The sun was low, casting long, sharp shadows across the lawn. I removed the tea bag and placed it on the saucer. I lifted the cup and took a sip. The heat was perfect, the flavor robust and calming. I held the warmth in my mouth for a moment before swallowing. This was the first cup of peace. It tasted of quiet. It tasted of choice. I had chosen this. Every step, from the smile at the party to the statement to the detective, had been a conscious choice. I had chosen not to be a victim of their narrative. I had chosen to write my own. The phone did not ring. No one knocked at the door. The world had receded, leaving me in this circle of sunlight, in this chair with this cup. After a while, I finished the tea. I sat for a long time as the sun moved and the shadows stretched. I felt the tension of the last weeks, the coiled readiness, the strategic calm, begin to dissolve from my muscles. It was not replaced by joy or triumph, but by a profound and simple fatigue, the good kind, the fatigue that comes after completing a necessary, difficult task. When the room began to grow dim, I stood. I took my cup to the kitchen and washed it, drying it carefully with a cloth. I put it back on its shelf. I moved through the house, turning on a few lamps against the deepening twilight. The pools of light made the familiar spaces feel new, seen again for the first time without the filter of other people's expectations. I made a simple dinner, a salad, a piece of fish. I ate at the kitchen table, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The food was good. I tasted it. Later, I went to my study. I sat at the desk. I did not turn on the computer. I looked at the books on the shelves, at David's pen. I opened a drawer and took out a sheet of my good stationery. I picked up a pen, not David's fountain pen, but a reliable ballpoint. I did not write a letter to my children. I did not write a journal entry. I wrote a list for tomorrow. It was a practical list, the kind I had made all my life. Call Arthur for update. Groceries, milk, eggs, bread. Library books due Thursday. Water the back garden. The mundane tasks of a life moving forward. The list was an act of faith in a future I would control, day by ordinary day. I placed the list on the desk where I would see it in the morning. I turned off the light and went upstairs. In my bedroom, I prepared for bed. The routine was the same as it had been for years. As I brushed my hair, I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my dark brown skin, my silver gray hair loose around my shoulders. The lines on my face were deep, earned. My eyes looked back at me, clear and tired and quiet. I got into bed. The sheets were cool and clean. I turned off the bedside lamp. The darkness was complete, and it was not frightening. It was a private darkness, belonging to me alone. I lay there, feeling the weight of my body on the mattress, listening to the faint, familiar sounds of the house settling for the night. There was no anger left. The cold fire of it had burned everything away, leaving only ash and clear ground. The sadness was there, a permanent resident in a far room of my heart, but its door was closed for tonight. I had thought revenge would feel like a closing, but as I drifted toward sleep, I realized it felt more like an opening. They were gone. The conflict was over. The space they had occupied in my mind and in my home was now empty. An empty space is just potential. It is room to breathe. It is room, perhaps, for something new to grow on my own terms. The last thing I was aware of before sleep took me was the sound of my own breath, steady and even in the dark, in and out, the simple sustaining rhythm of a life that was, once again, entirely my own.